She thought I was weak, but she had no idea who was standing behind me.
The late summer sun blazed down on the quiet suburban cul-de-sac of Willow Creek Estates. White picket fences lined the neatly trimmed lawns, each one competing to look more perfect than the last. To the neighbors, this community was the embodiment of order and status, a place where rules weren't just guidelines, they were treated like gospel. But for Danielle Carter, moving into this neighborhood was more than a change of address. It was a dream come true. She and her husband, Lieutenant Marcus Carter, had worked tirelessly to buy their first home. Marcus, a proud Army officer, had spent years in service overseas, while Danielle juggled both her career as a nurse and raising their young daughter. Every penny saved, every late night endured, had led them to this very moment, the day Danielle set foot in front of her new home. With a warm smile, Danielle carried the last of the moving boxes from her car trunk. She wasn't just carrying cardboard. She was carrying hope. Hope for a safer place to raise her daughter. Hope for a fresh start after years of sacrifice. And hope that this community, with its glossy charm, would finally give them the peace they deserved. But hope has a way of being tested. Across the street, curtains shifted. Eyes followed her every move. Whispers curled through the air like smoke. Danielle felt it even before she saw it. The kind of attention that wasn't born from curiosity, but from judgment. And then it happened. A sharp voice cut through the still air. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing here?" Danielle turned. Standing just a few feet away was a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard tucked under her arm. Her posture was stiff, her chin lifted as though gravity didn't dare pull it down. This was Kathy Mitchell, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, or as most neighbors secretly called her, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood. Danielle blinked, caught off guard. I live here. My family just moved in." Kathy's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't kind. It was the kind of smile that concealed suspicion. "Moved in? Are you sure? Because we have very strict standards around here. And frankly, you don't look like—" She paused, scanning Danielle up and down. "Someone who belongs." The sting of those words hit hard. Danielle's heart tightened, but she held her composure. She had faced tougher moments before. Long hospital shifts, the struggles of holding everything together while her husband was deployed. She wasn't going to let a stranger's arrogance shatter her excitement. Still, the tension was undeniable. This wasn't going to be an ordinary neighborhood squabble. This was the beginning of something far bigger. Because what Danielle didn't know, and what Kathy couldn't even imagine, was that one act of arrogance, one reckless decision, would soon flip their worlds upside down. A clash was brewing, one that would test resilience, expose prejudice, and remind everyone watching what true strength looks like. If you believe justice always finds its way, then keep watching until the very end of this story. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more inspiring real-life tales that prove character always outweighs cruelty. Kathy Mitchell wasn't just the HOA president. She was Willow Creek's self-proclaimed gatekeeper. The title gave her a sense of power, a throne from which she ruled with an iron fist disguised as community standards. To Kathy, every blade of grass, every shade of paint, and every neighbor's lifestyle had to align with her personal vision of perfection. And if it didn't, she made sure people paid for it. Neighbors whispered about her behind closed doors. They called her Karen with a clipboard. Some laughed, but most feared crossing her. Because Kathy knew how to make life miserable, she wielded fines like weapons. A misplaced trash bin? 50, a lawn gnome she didn't approve of? 100, a car parked slightly over the line? Pecked a threatening letter the next day. Kathy thrived on control, and she especially relished any opportunity to remind others that she was above them. So when Danielle Carter arrived, young, radiant, and clearly proud of her new home, Kathy saw more than just a new neighbor. She saw an outsider, a disruption to her carefully curated order. The following morning, as Danielle watered the small flower bed she had just planted by her mailbox, Kathy strolled over, her heels clicking against the pavement. Her oversized sunglasses reflected Danielle's every movement, giving the impression of a predator circling prey. "Good morning," Danielle said politely. trying to extend warmth despite the cold reception from the day before. Kathy didn't return the smile. Instead, she raised her clipboard. "I need to remind you that flowers around the mailbox must be approved by the HOA. You can't just plant whatever you like. We have a standard here." Danielle paused, confused. "They're just petunias. Thought a little color might brighten up the front yard." Kathy's laugh was sharp, hollow. "That's the problem. You thought. But in Willow Creek, we don't just do things our own way. Rules are what keep this neighborhood desirable." Danielle felt the sting again. She wanted to argue, but something in Kathy's tone told her it wouldn't matter. Kathy wasn't here to help. She was here to dominate. Later that week, Danielle's daughter, Maya, drew chalk flowers on the driveway. Innocent, colorful swirls of pink, blue, and yellow. To Maya, it was art. To Kathy, it was vandalism. She stormed across the street, waving her clipboard like a badge of authority. "That is not acceptable here. Chalk on the driveway lowers property values. Do you understand what kind of example this sets?" Danielle's heart sank as her daughter's eyes filled with tears. "She's just a child," Danielle defended. But Kathy leaned in, lowering her sunglasses just enough to show the icy glare in her eyes. "Children should be taught rules. Otherwise, they grow up thinking they can do whatever they want. And we won't tolerate that in my neighborhood." That last word, "my," hung in the air like a declaration. Kathy didn't see herself as just another resident. She believed Willow Creek belonged to her, and in her mind, Danielle was already a problem to be solved. What Kathy didn't realize, however, was that her arrogance had set something in motion. The more she tried to crush Danielle's spirit, the closer she pushed her toward revealing the strength that had been quietly waiting beneath the surface. Because Danielle Carter wasn't just another homeowner. She was a woman who had endured storms Kathy couldn't imagine. And soon, that truth would shatter the facade of Kathy's power. The days passed, and the shine of Danielle's new home dimmed under Kathy's constant shadow. There was always something. Trash cans that had been placed out too early. Curtains that didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. Even the way Danielle parked her car. It felt endless. Most people in Danielle's shoes might have cracked. But not her. What Kathy didn't know was that resilience had been stitched into Danielle's life long before Willow Creek. Danielle grew up on the south side of Atlanta, where her mother, a single parent, worked double shifts as a waitress just to keep the lights on. They didn't have manicured lawns or tidy cul-de-sacs. They had cracked sidewalks and neighbors who struggled just to make rent. But those hardships planted something deep inside Danielle. She learned that survival wasn't about appearances. It was about grit. She watched her mother come home exhausted but still smile, still encourage Danielle to dream beyond the walls of their small apartment. It was in that apartment where Danielle decided she would never let circumstances define her. She became the first in her family to graduate college. She worked nights as a caregiver, balancing textbooks in one hand and exhaustion in the other. That determination carried her into nursing, where she thrived in the chaos of hospital life. Emergencies, long shifts, impossible odds. Danielle didn't just endure them. She excelled. And when she met Marcus, the young Army officer with a steady gaze and an unshakable sense of duty, she saw someone who understood sacrifice just as much as she did. Their love wasn't built on convenience. It was forged in shared resilience. Marcus often told her, "You're stronger than you think, Danny. Stronger than anyone gives you credit for." Those words echoed now. Each time Kathy's voice tried to chip away at her spirit. One evening, Danielle sat on her porch, sipping tea as the sun dipped below the rooftops. She thought back to the years when Marcus had been deployed overseas. Months of silence broken only by letters. Nights spent worrying if he'd ever return. And yet, through it all, she had kept her family together, raised their daughter, and never let despair win. Compared to that, Kathy's pettiness seemed small. Still painful, still unjust, but small. Even so, Danielle knew something was building. One Saturday, Danielle decided to host a small barbecue for her family. Nothing extravagant, just burgers, laughter, and music playing softly from a portable speaker. Her daughter's giggles filled the air as cousins chased each other across the lawn. For a moment, it felt like home until Kathy showed up. "Excuse me?" Kathy barked from the sidewalk, arms crossed. "This is not permitted." Outdoor gatherings must be approved by the HOA, and that music completely inappropriate for this neighborhood. Danielle felt the heat rise in her chest, but she remained calm. "It's just family, Kathy. We're not disturbing anyone." Kathy sneered. "Maybe where you came from, this is acceptable. But here we value order. If you can't respect that, maybe you're not a good fit for Willow Creek." Those words stung deeper than the others. Not a good fit. Her family, who had heard every word, fell silent. The children stopped playing. The music clicked off. Danielle could feel everyone's eyes on her, waiting to see how she'd respond. And though she stayed composed on the outside, inside something shifted. It wasn't anger, it was resolve. Danielle remembered her mother's voice, telling her, "Never let anyone convince you that you don't belong. You've earned every step you take." She also remembered the countless times she'd been underestimated, by professors who doubted her, by colleagues who questioned her skills, by people who assumed her worth based on appearances. And each time she had proven them wrong. This was no different. Kathy might think her clipboard gave her power, but Danielle knew better. True strength didn't come from authority. It came from resilience, character, and the courage to stand tall when others tried to shrink you. Later that night, Marcus returned home in his army fatigues. He wrapped his arms around Danielle and listened as she recounted the barbecue incident. His jaw tightened, but Danielle placed her hand on his arm. "Don't worry," she said softly. "I can handle her." Marcus looked at her with admiration. He had seen her weather storms most people couldn't imagine. "I know you can," he said. "You always do." What Danielle didn't realize was that her moment to prove it, her moment to silence every whisper, every judgment, was closer than she thought, because sometimes life has a way of setting the stage for those who are quietly preparing in the shadows. And when that stage appears, it doesn't just test you, it reveals you. Danielle's test was coming, and it would shock everyone who thought they had her figured out. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where the air felt heavy, as if the world knew something was about to change. Danielle had just returned from her hospital shift, exhausted but relieved. When she saw it, a bright orange paper taped to her front door. Notice of HOA violation. Kathy's handwriting sprawled across the page with unnecessary boldness. Unapproved decorations, noise complaints, and unsanctioned gatherings. Fines totaling 1,200, immediate compliance required. Danielle's chest tightened. "Only 200? For flowers, family, and laughter?" Her daughter tugged at her sleeve, confused. "Mommy, did we do something bad?" Danielle knelt, brushing a hand over Maya's curls. "No, sweetheart. We didn't do anything wrong." But as she looked up, she saw Kathy standing across the street, arms folded, lips curled in a triumphant smirk. She wasn't hiding it anymore. This wasn't about rules. It was about power. About control. That night, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, the notice in his hands. His brow furrowed, but Danielle stopped him before he could speak. "No, Marcus," she said firmly. "This is mine to handle. She thinks I'm weak. She thinks I'll break. But she has no idea who she's dealing with." Marcus studied her, then slowly nodded. "All right. Then tomorrow you show her." The next day, the HOA board held its monthly meeting in the neighborhood clubhouse. Usually only a handful of residents showed up, but word had spread about Danielle's violations. Curiosity pulled people in. By evening, the room buzzed with neighbors whispering, some sympathetic, others eager to see what drama Kathy had stirred up. Danielle walked in wearing a simple navy dress. No clipboard, no stack of papers, just quiet confidence. Marcus stood at the back, his uniform pressed and spotless, silent but solid as a pillar. Kathy, perched at the head of the table, tapped her pen against her clipboard. "Let's begin. First order of business. Homeowner Danielle Carter's repeated violations of community standards." Gasps rustled through the crowd. Danielle stood slowly, steadying her breath. Every eye locked on her. Kathy leaned back, smug. "Mrs. Carter, do you have anything to say for yourself? Because frankly, it looks to me like you don't understand how things work in this neighborhood." For a moment, silence hung thick. And then Danielle spoke, not loudly, but with a clarity that filled the room. "You're right," she began. "I don't understand. I don't understand how flowers by a mailbox, Children's laughter and family barbecues can be considered violations. I don't understand how joy and community are treated like threats. And I certainly don't understand how someone who is supposed to represent us spends more time tearing neighbors down than lifting them up. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few people nodded. Kathy's smile faltered. Danielle continued, her voice steady. I grew up in a place where people had nothing. No manicured lawns, no fancy clubhouses, no safety nets. What we did have was each other. Neighbors looked out for one another. When someone was sick, we brought food. When someone was struggling, we pitched in. That's what community meant. Her eyes swept the room, meeting the gazes of people who had been silent too long. So imagine my surprise when I came here, when I finally achieved the dream of buying a home in a neighborhood like this. And instead of welcome, I was met with suspicion. Instead of kindness, hostility. And from the very person who should be setting an example. The room fell completely silent. Even the whispers stopped. Kathy cleared her throat, her voice sharper now. This isn't about kindness. This is about rules. If you can't respect that... But Danielle cut her off, her tone unwavering. Respect isn't demanded by rules. It's earned by actions. A collective gasp spread through the audience. Marcus, still at the back, allowed the faintest hint of a smile. Danielle took a step closer to the table. Do you know what it's like to sit by a phone for months, praying it doesn't ring with bad news from overseas? Do you know what it's like to work 12-hour hospital shifts, saving lives while worrying if your own family is okay? Do you know what it's like to explain to your child why someone treats her like she doesn't belong? Her voice cracked slightly, but she held her ground. I do. And that's why I refuse to be intimidated by you. The audience stirred, people exchanging glances. For the first time, Kathy looked unsettled. Danielle straightened. You wanted to make an example out of me. Fine, let me give you one. Strength isn't measured by how many fines you can hand out, or how many people you can scare into silence. Strength is measured by how much you can endure without breaking. And I promise you this, I will not break. A hush settled over the room. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then slowly, a neighbor in the back clapped. Another joined. Within seconds, the entire room was filled with applause. Kathy's face burned crimson. Her hand tightened around the pen, but she couldn't stop the wave of support rising around Danielle. Danielle didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply stood tall, her presence enough to silence the woman who had tried so hard to crush her. And though the night wasn't over, though the story had yet to twist in ways no one expected, one thing was clear. Danielle had just proven herself, not just to Kathy, not just to Willow Creek, but to herself. The applause still echoed through the clubhouse as Kathy scrambled to regain her footing. She slammed her pen down, her voice rising above the claps. Enough! This spectacle doesn't change the facts. Rules are rules. And if Mrs. Carter can't respect them, then maybe she should consider whether Willow Creek is the right place for her family. The clapping died down, and silence returned. Danielle stood quietly, her chin raised. But before she could respond, another voice spoke. Deep, firm, commanding. Excuse me, Marcus said as he stepped forward from the back of the room. Heads turned. The sight of him in uniform instantly drew attention. The sharp creases of his army fatigues, the patches on his shoulders, the calm authority in his posture. It all radiated respect. Kathy blinked, thrown off balance. And you are? She asked, her tone faltering. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I'm Lieutenant Marcus Carter, Danielle's husband. I've spent the past years serving this country, defending the very freedoms that allow communities like Willow Creek to exist. While my wife has been here raising our daughter and working as a nurse to save lives, I've been overseas, putting my own life on the line. Gasps swept across the room. Several neighbors sat straighter, shame flickering across their faces. Marcus stepped closer, his gaze locked on Kathy. And I come home to find out that the woman I love, the strongest woman I know, has been harassed for planting flowers and hosting her family, that she's been fined, mocked, and made to feel unwelcome in the very home we sacrificed everything to afford. Kathy opened her mouth, but no words came out. Marcus's voice remained calm, but his words carried weight. Let me make something clear. My wife has endured far worse than your clipboard and your condescension. She's carried our family through deployments, through uncertainty, through nights where she didn't know if I'd ever return. She has more strength in her than you could ever comprehend." The room was silent, except for the sound of neighbors shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. Danielle reached for Marcus's hand, grounding him, but he wasn't done, you see. "Kathy," he continued, his tone sharp now, "you think rules make you powerful. But power isn't about control, it's about responsibility. And you've abused yours. Instead of fostering community, you've turned this neighborhood into a place of fear." "That ends tonight," murmurs erupted. Some neighbors nodded. Others whispered in agreement. The tide was turning. Kathy, flustered, tried to muster a defense. I didn't know who you were. I was only doing my job. If I had known..." Marcus cut her off, his eyes narrowing. "That's exactly the problem. Respect shouldn't depend on who someone is. It shouldn't depend on rank, title, or uniform. My wife deserved it from the moment she moved here, because she's a human being, a neighbor, and a mother. That's all the reason you ever needed." The weight of his words crushed whatever illusion of authority Kathy had left. Her face drained of color as the truth hung heavy in the air. Danielle, her voice gentle but firm, finally spoke again. "You wanted to make me feel small, Kathy. But all you did was remind me of how strong I am, and how strong we are together." Neighbors broke into applause once more, louder, fuller, unrestrained this time. People who had stayed silent before now clapped openly, some even standing. Kathy lowered her head, her clipboard slipping from her hands onto the table. For the first time, she had no power, no control. She had been exposed, not just as unfair, but as hypocritical, because now everyone knew the truth. Danielle wasn't just a nurse, a wife, or a mother. She was the backbone of a family that had sacrificed for the greater good. And Marcus wasn't just a man in uniform. He was living proof of the values Kathy pretended to enforce, but never truly understood. The room shifted that night. A line had been drawn, and Kathy was on the wrong side of it. The clubhouse buzzed with murmurs, the sound of shifting loyalties echoing against the walls. Kathy, once so confident with her clipboard and her rules, now looked small at the head of the table. Her carefully composed image was cracking, and everyone could see it. One of the board members, an older gentleman named Mr. Evans, cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Kathy, this has gone too far. We joined the HOA board to keep the neighborhood running smoothly, not to humiliate people. Mrs. Carter has a point. Community should be about more than fines." Another voice chimed in, a woman from the second row. "She fined me last year for leaving a holiday wreath up too long." "I thought I was the only one." A younger neighbor added, "Same here. She wrote me up for parking my car in front of my own house overnight. I've wanted to speak up, but I was afraid." The floodgates had opened. One by one, neighbors began sharing stories. Small injustices, nitpicky rules, moments of humiliation. Each revelation chipped away at the authority Kathy had built for herself. Kathy's eyes darted around the room, her face flushed. "You all agreed to these rules. I was just enforcing what you voted on." But no one was listening anymore. The illusion of her power had shattered. She wasn't the queen of Willow Creek. She was just a bully with a clipboard. Mr. Evans, his voice steady, spoke again. "I think it's clear we need new leadership. Kathy, you've lost the trust of this community." I motioned for a vote of no confidence. Hands shot up across the room. Some hesitant, some bold, but enough to seal her fate. Kathy's mouth fell open. "You can't, this is my..." But the words caught in her throat. The reality was undeniable. The very people she had lorded over had turned against her. Danielle watched silently, her hand still in Marcus's. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. Justice didn't need celebration. It spoke for itself. Finally, the vote concluded. Kathy was officially removed as HOA president. The clipboard that had once symbolized her power now sat abandoned on the table. Meaningless, she gathered her things in silence, her eyes avoiding Danielle's. For the first time, she looked not powerful but powerless, not superior, but small. And as she left the clubhouse, the neighbors who once bowed under her authority didn't follow. They turned their attention instead to Danielle, the woman Kathy had tried to diminish, but who had risen above it all. Kathy's reign was over, and the neighborhood would never look at her the same way again. In the days following the vote, Willow Creek Estates felt different. The air was lighter, conversations friendlier. Where there had once been tension and suspicion, there was now relief, and slowly, respect. Neighbors who had watched silently as Kathy wielded her clipboard of power now began crossing the street to greet Danielle. Some brought over baked goods. Others stopped to apologize for not speaking up sooner. One morning, Mrs. Robinson, an elderly neighbor with silver hair and a kind smile, knocked on Danielle's door. She held a small basket of muffins. "I should have defended you sooner," she admitted softly. "I let fear keep me quiet. But your strength, it gave me courage. Thank you for standing up, not just for yourself, but for all of us." Danielle accepted the basket with tears welling in her eyes. She hadn't set out to be a symbol. She had only wanted peace for her family. But now she realized her resilience had done something bigger. It had awakened others. Soon, the HOA board, under new leadership, began rewriting its priorities. Fines were no longer the focus. Community events, neighborhood improvements, and acts of kindness took their place. Where Kathy had enforced order through fear, Danielle's example inspired unity through compassion. At the next neighborhood gathering, instead of silence and suspicion, there was laughter, children playing freely, and neighbors sharing stories. Danielle watched Maya run across the lawn with her chalk, drawing flowers without anyone scolding her. For the first time, Danielle felt what she had longed for: home. Marcus, standing beside her in casual clothes now, wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "See, you changed this place." "Not me, not the uniform, you." Danielle smiled, leaning into him. "Maybe, but we did it together." The most surprising shift came a week later when the local news station caught wind of the story. A journalist interviewed Danielle about her experience, and the segment aired during the evening broadcast. The headline read, "Nurse stands up to HOA harassment. Inspires neighborhood change." The piece highlighted her perseverance, her commitment to her family, and her refusal to let prejudice or arrogance define her. It wasn't sensational, it was inspirational. And it struck a chord far beyond Willow Creek. Messages began pouring in. Emails from strangers, letters from women who had faced similar struggles, veterans who thanked Marcus for his service and praised Danielle for her courage, families who admitted they too had once felt like outsiders in their own communities. Danielle read each message with a mix of humility and gratitude. She had never thought her story would matter beyond her street. But now she realized it wasn't just about her. It was about anyone who had ever been made to feel small, anyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. And now, through her stand, those people felt seen. The neighborhood began to reflect that change tangibly. Neighbors started helping one another, cutting grass for the elderly, organizing playdates for kids, and even planting community gardens. The sterile perfection that Kathy had once enforced gave way to something far more beautiful. Imperfection filled with life, color, and warmth. Willow Creek Estates had become what Danielle dreamed of all along. Not just a place to live, but a place to belong. As she tucked Maya into bed one night, Danielle kissed her forehead and whispered, "See, sweetheart, this is what happens when you stand up for what's right. People notice, and the world gets better." Her daughter smiled sleepily. "You're like a hero, Mommy." Danielle's heart swelled. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a woman who had simply refused to back down. But maybe that was what heroes really were, ordinary people who chose courage over fear. And in choosing courage, Danielle hadn't just changed her own life. She had changed an entire community. In the end, Danielle's story wasn't just about a homeowner standing up to an overzealous HOA president. It was about something deeper. The timeless truth that dignity, kindness, and resilience will always outshine arrogance and control. Kathy believed power came from rules and authority. Danielle showed the world that real power comes from character. She reminded her neighbors and everyone watching that respect should never depend on status, titles, or appearances. It should be given freely, because every person deserves to feel they belong. Her courage transformed a community. Her voice encouraged others to speak up, and her resilience reminded everyone that even in the face of injustice, one person's strength can spark change that ripples far beyond what they ever imagined. The truth is, we all have a Danielle moment at some point in our lives, a moment when someone tries to make us feel small, unworthy, or out of place. And in that moment, the choice is ours. Stay silent or stand tall. Danielle chose to stand tall. And because of that, she not only earned her place, she created space for others to feel welcome too. So let this story remind you, never underestimate your own strength. Never let anyone convince you that you don't belong. And always remember, kindness and courage are more powerful than fear and control. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. Together, let's keep spreading hope, justice, and the belief that good always wins.